Life doesn't stop while on vacation. Neither do medical issues, accidents, or worse. We are going to ask the questions others won't, so you can protect yourself and your family.
Hi, everyone. I'm John Child, Cruise Addicts, and we're going to talk about injuries to children during a cruise. It's something we don't want to think about, but unfortunately it happens, and what parents need to know. And I've got a little bit of an intro. Cruises are designed to be fun, relaxing vacations for the entire family, right? But accidents involving children can and do happen at sea. Today, we're joined by maritime attorney Tom Scolaro to discuss what parents need to know about injuries to children during a cruise. From water slides and pools to kids clubs and shore excursions, cruise ships offer countless activities for young travelers. But when something goes wrong, many parents are surprised that the cruise ship injury cases are very different from typical land-based accidents. Maritime law, the cruise ticket contracts, and strict filing deadlines can impact families' rights. And like I said, it's a little bit of a mouthful, but I wanted to bring it up to you. And because this is something that we're doing with these live streams, and of course they're also recorded, so please go back and look at the previous ones. And we're using these as a resource and having Tom Scolaro here to share this information. We hope nothing ever happens, and I've been very fortunate in my life to not have many incidents at all, anything to this level. But when they do occur, a lot of families are noticing it's much more difficult. Things are stacked against us as consumers than we might think so. If you think it's hard to get your cruise tips refunded or other things, when you have a problem with the cruise line, wait till you have an injury. You're going to see a whole different situation, and things aren't so nice, I'm finding. Like I said, 99.9% of the time, everything's fine. But unfortunately, when things go wrong, we need to reach out to Tom Scolaro and his law firm to actually help us. And with that note, we're going to get Tom in here, and we're going to start talking about injuries to children during a cruise and what parents need to know. Hi, Tom. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, John. How you doing today?
Like I said, it's a little bit of a mouthful, but there's a lot there to cover. And we've kind of covered on similar topics during our previous discussions. But these are things that are happening every day on many different ships, from simple falls to many more serious things, usually linked to going down to the infirmary and so on and so forth. What are the most common ways that our children are actually injured on cruise ships? Is there something that comes to mind?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me, John. Most people listening to this podcast today, they do so because they love cruising, right?
Right.
And I get it. But as a maritime litigator, I get to see the other side of the brochure
Right.
that they're not really going to tell you about. So when you walk across the gangway from the port and you board the ship, you are really performing a legal act of state. You're leaving the protections of your home state's laws and entering a world governed by 19th century maritime doctrines and 21st century corporate contracts that are, pretty much designed to silence you. But today, I'm not here to tell you how to pack. I'm here to tell you how the law views your child's life at sea, which is often as I hate to say this, a pecuniary zero. Under what we've talked about previously, like DOSHA, and we'll get into DOSHA later. And what you must do today to ensure that if the unthinkable happens, the cruise line can't hide behind a flag of convenience or a fine print waiver. But to answer your question a little bit more directly, the ways that a kid can get injured on a cruise ship are innumerable. It's just any little thing. I went through this yesterday, at not on a cruise ship, but my son had a birthday party. It was a soccer game, and they went to some indoor soccer facility. And lo and behold, of course, if some kid's going to get hurt, it's going to be mine. Playing indoor soccer, and he's fine, but essentially any recreational activity aboard the cruise ship, I can tell you, and I can even describe to you in detail how the fact pattern can exist where a child has been injured, where I have represented somebody, everything from pickleball to basketball to capture the flag to freeze tag to water slides. Going in the kids clubs, any sort of just garden variety slip and fall, food allergies, excursions, and there's also a sadder topic to talk about later on, which is sexual assaults and voyeurism. those types of claims. But it's innumerable, and malpractice as well. It's been unfortunately a substantial part of our involvement with children and their cases. It's a jungle out there.
Yeah, I think going back to the early days of cruising, it was pretty simple. The ships weren't anything like they were. They were basically, you went on board, you stayed, and then you went to a restaurant, different things. You might lounge, but now they literally have the full water parks. Several large pools, go-kart tracks, roller coasters, pickleball, basketball, and so on and so forth. Laser tag. I mean, depending on the ship that you're on, it has so many different opportunities. And even slides that go from the top of the ship, dry slides that go from the top of the ship to the bottom of the ship. And it just takes one little hiccup in anything to cause a potential accident. And on land, but now we're at sea where it's harder to get to a hospital, right?
Yeah, it's the way I look at these things is that these cruise ships are essentially floating Disney worlds wrapped in a industrial complex. Where you think of an industrial ship with all of its apparatuses and parts and steel and iron and doors you can chop an arm off of and all sorts of things. But it's like putting Disney World in that type of environment, because it is, people talk about cruise ships as floating cities, but really what they're floating theme parks. And there's just competition for eyeballs and wanting your attention and your involvement. And safety is again, it's always supposed to be in the back of the mind, but on vacation, as we've talked about previously, it's just there's a letting down of the guard, especially on parents. Kids never have their guard up. Right? Yeah, they just don't.
They just go.
No, but in terms of the parents, they think, all right, it's not like my child can get lost or kidnapped in a shopping mall here. We're at sea, they're not going to get lost, but other things can and certainly do happen, unfortunately.
Yeah, and that's why I kind of had that intro, because there's so many things. The shore excursions, we haven't even talked about that, and we've talked about these in individual live streams that we've done. The complexities of it all, and it's very, very complex. So I've got a lot of topics in front of me. I put this in an interesting order, so I'm just kind of, if I can go with it.
Sure.
We know that pools, if you think about cruising, I know for me and my family, my daughter loved pools, still does, and she's 17. but so you have small children, and you maybe you get that first big getaway, and you're going to go and you're going to have a resort style vacation. And of course, it's so all inclusive. You don't have to travel, which of course is harder with the children. A road trip. So you go on a cruise. A pool would be a major thing, right? So lifeguards and swim at your own risk policies, that's a pretty major thing, isn't it?
It is, and the vast majority of them don't provide lifeguards, and it is swim at your own risk, and they do that really only for one reason: it's to disclaim liability. It's certainly, why do they want to do that? Because if you have a lifeguard, you're acknowledging under the law that is a potentially hazardous condition that you know about. And if you're taking steps to minimize that risk and that lifeguard performs the task negligently, the cruise ship can be held liable. But if they put a sign up, and say you swim at your own risk, then they don't, quote, have notice. And, everybody's, it's a free for all. And these cruise ship, it's always funny. Like if you look at the commercials where they show the swimming pools and things like that, there may be 5 or 6 people in the swimming pool on the commercials. But when you actually, go on a cruise and take a look at what it looks like at high time, you can barely see the water. There's so many people.
Yeah.
And it's such an environment for somebody to, end up beneath the water, especially, again, alcohol's at play, other people not being appropriate, they're not your kids. And that certainly sets an environment where something untoward can happen to a child. And it's happened. And yet they will not put lifeguards on. This has been something that the industry has known about for obviously a long time, but they don't do anything about it. And you have to ask yourself, well, what is the motive, right? And we all know what the motive is. So again, if you're a parent taking a child or your children on a cruise, understand that especially when you get around a swimming pool, that is not a time in which you can, immerse yourself in your favorite book with your favorite cocktail. That's probably the time most in which you need to have your eyes on your children, because there's no one from the cruise line out there with a whistle like we all would expect on TV. Hey, stop running, stop doing it. And it doesn't exist. So be mindful of that.
Now, the good news is I can say this. I have seen more lifeguards. I know I brought it up in the past in our past. I can't speak for every cruise line. And of course you have inside knowledge dealing with these things. But I have seen some major cruise lines that have, because at the one point there was none.
Yeah.
And then some horrific things happened with one cruise line that carries a lot of children had a drowning. And then I started to see them on a lot of the major cruise lines that carry deal with a lot of families. Yep. You see the lifeguards are present, but of course that's probably not all the cruise lines.
It's not. And, the sad thing is, and I know that which of what you're speaking about, it should not take a child dying before you act appropriately, because we all know what is expected. But again, they just push and push and push until they can't ignore it anymore. But it shouldn't take that much.
Yeah, and some cruise lines do have special areas. They're usually more splash park areas, and then they have a pool area. But I've seen countless. Children want to get in the hot tubs. Children want to get in the main pools. They want to be near their parents. They want to be near adults. And that's where it gets complicated, because like you said, they can get overcrowded on the 1 or 2 days that you're at sea. Everybody wants to be in the pool at noon or, in the middle of the day. It's hot. It's not.
Those splash zones and fun zones are, they're really nice. They're really a good idea for kids. But I'll give you just another example. Not my case, a friend of mine's case, where he represents a family of a young kid who was coming down a water slide, and they had this permanently affixed umbrella stand darn near close to the bottom of the water slide. So the kid came off and shattered his leg. Now, you would think, all right, that's not supposed to happen. And of course it's not supposed to happen. And a claim is brought up. My friend brought the claim against the cruise line. And the thing that we are seeing much more so now, because of how some of these decisions have been rendered by the courts, is that's not enough. Just because something like that happened to a child, and you would think, well, what idiot would set up a permanently affixed umbrella so close to the slide that a kid can forcibly come off and shatter his leg? No one, right? It's an idiotic thing to do. However, the law says being an idiot isn't enough, and being stupid isn't enough. You have to prove that there have been other exact similar type of incidents that have occurred before the cruise ship has, quote, notice that it was negligent, or notice that it was not a smart thing to do. And of course, now the courts have required us to provide this notice before we even file a lawsuit, meaning we have to somehow comb their own internal records, comb the databases, comb past filings, comb the internet, and find all these things, as opposed, because they're the ones sitting on the information. They have it. But we're supposed to know this stuff beforehand. Otherwise, your lawsuit will get kicked out of court because you didn't provide notice in the actual operative complaint. A little bit of a crazy pleading standard, but that's what we tell our clients now, and the parents of children. It says, and we're usually listening to hysterical parents. They're furious about what happened, but I have to temper that down a little bit and say, listen, I understand they were morons and idiots for setting something up like this or doing X, Y, or Z. I get it, and I'm going to put that all in the lawsuit. However, our lawsuit will get kicked out of court unless we can detail with factual specificity how many times this has occurred in the past. It's like they don't understand it. Clients never understand it. I don't blame them. It doesn't make sense, but that is part of what is now. It didn't used to be that way. These are now just one more hurdle that parents and clients and customers and passengers have to overcome when something bad gets happened. Because again, these cruise lines, once something bad happens to you, there's a distinction. They're not there to care for you anymore. They're there to protect themselves. And so that becomes very adversarial, and they will treat you differently, and they will make sure that if a lawsuit is provided, they're not going to apologize, they're not going to make it right. They're going to fight you every step of the way, regardless of right and wrong. So you got to be prepared for that reality.
Yeah, is that considered case law that the judge in that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, this has been a development. This is not statutory. This has just been a development of the case law over time. We would file these cases and these lawsuits, and the cruise line would, and this was an argument that had been making since time immemorial. They were saying, how can we be held responsible? We didn't know it was a dangerous condition. To which, fine, the law requires us to prove that something's a dangerous condition, but we normally would get the benefit of being able to conduct discovery, take depositions, request their own corporate documents so we could figure this stuff out. Now, it's like the cart is before the horse. We're supposed to know this before we even file, which I still can't quite wrap my head around.
Yes, that's very obstructive, I would say.
It is. It's but I can cry about it, or I can, just do something about it, and we just have to deal with it.
Yeah, I guess that's the chess match that's happening, and maybe there'll be another ruling in the future.
I hope so.
Yeah. So, we've talked about the pools. We've talked about some other things. Safety risks parents should watch out for aboard it. I know it's vast. Is there a handful of things that come to mind that you just should get out there to parents?
Well, I can put this into a few buckets. Number one, I'd say, first is with your children, don't let them wander the cruise ship unsupervised, even though they may be a preteen or a teen. There's no, sometimes there's a curfew on some of these cruise ships at like 1 a.m., but institute your own curfew. There's no reason kids should be out gallivanting on the cruise ship alone with other teens or preteens, at midnight or 11 o'clock. Nothing good is gonna come of that. It's not like there's activities open during that time. It's dark. Somebody will get alcohol, right? It just always involves alcohol. Somebody's going to get alcohol from some adult someplace, and nothing's going to happen. So I would always say, forget what the cruise ship, curfew is. Put your own curfew out there on it. And another thing is, if you're going to use these kid camps and these daycare centers, be the nosy parent. Check in every once in a while. Ask the uncomfortable questions. There have been occasions, and I can't say the line or much more of what happened, but there have been occasions where children have been dropped off, and the most offensive things you can think about have occurred with those children, and you end up scarring somebody for life. To what? These people, they don't undergo FBI background checks, right? They're people from other foreign countries. You don't know where they've been. You don't know culturally what they think is appropriate or inappropriate. They don't have, the same fear that you would understand a land-based operator to have. They don't operate under the same microscope that they do. It's a very different type of environment. And, when you get bad actors, they take advantage of lax security. They take advantage of lax parents. They take advantage of, a lax environment. And all it takes is just a couple of minutes. So those two big buckets, I would say, watch your children, make sure that they're coming back at a normal hour. And for those with young children, very young children, ask the uncomfortable questions, of their staff and of their supervisors. Yeah.
Or just keep them with you, right? The ships are bigger.
You think my wife would ever let my kids out of our sight? I don't care what the promise is. No,
My daughter didn't want to be away from us at all. When she was younger, it was rare that and it's always been an issue with cruising because the parents are kind of looking for a semi-vacation of their own, a little bit of time. So there's that double-edged sword. We all want to be with our children, but we also want some time alone too, and be together at the same time, right?
Yeah. Although in my house, my alone time comes when the kids turn 18. That's when we'll get it. Other than that, no. I'm the type of parent where if we go on a cruise, they're attached to it. But then again, I know some of my best friends. They specifically take cruise ship vacations because they can put the kids in the camps and the aftercare and things of that nature, and they could let loose a little bit. I get it, different strokes for different folks, man. But not in my house.
Now, you hadn't brought it up, but I was thinking, I know we brought it up in the past, some of the trouble areas that come to my mind is the buffet area, slip and falls, just for anybody, right? And especially little ones.
Yeah, good point, because what do little kids do much more than adults? They run.
Yeah.
They run around much more.
Everywhere.
Now, they look, to their credit, a lot of them they bounce like a cat.
Yeah.
A lot of them just bounce like a cat. You could drop them off of a building and they just land on all fours. It's like freaky.
Yeah.
But they certainly fall more often than than adults because they are running around. They usually have sneakers or flip flops that are worn out. Never seen a kid with a great pair of tread on their shoes because they got a lot of mileage on them. So those are real risks. And a good point too, John, to tell your children on a cruise ship, no running. It's like, you say no running around the pool, right? No running around the ship. Will they listen? Probably not. But the environment of and the ability and risk of falling is exponentially higher on a cruise ship because in close quarters, different surfaces, different frictions, much more likely to occur than it would be outside of the ship setting.
Yeah. So thank you for sharing that. And another thing that came to mind too, and we brought this up too in another one, and so many things and I think it happened to an adult that had diabetes, and was the hot decks. These decks are extremely, extremely hot. Of course, they're slippery. And I remember I brought it up that my daughter, gets on the cruise ship. It was when the slides were new. These big water parks had started. The children want to go to the top of the water slide. You have to go across. You got to go from your room. You have to possibly walk through the buffet or through the pool area. Then you have to walk the steps. Sometimes you have to go to another deck and then get to the steps that bring you to the top of the slide. So you should have something on your feet because the decks are extremely hot. But then here's the kicker. You can't wear slides down the slide.
Way down. Exactly.
So now the scenario is dad's got to take the child up and get her on the slide almost to the top, because depending on their age and size, you got to make sure they're big enough to go down the slide. So you might have to walk all the way to the top with her and then walk back down after she goes down the slide with her shoes in your hand. But then when she goes down to the bottom, mom's got to be there to greet her and hold her, and then dad's got to run down and put the shoes back on. So
that's a nightmare for a parent. But you know what also is going on too, and again, we see this all the time, is what is happening when the kid is going up and down the slide line. They're bringing water around all of the other common elements and the other places that the adults, the people that are otherwise not paying attention, traverse. And I can't tell you how many times most of the slip and falls outside of the buffet area involve places where people are traipsing water, either from the pool, from the slide, but usually from the pool. And it's invariable. They just bring water with them wherever they're going, and it just drips off their bathing suit, their body, and it's one person doesn't see where they're going. Whoosh, they go up,
You know what I was thinking, Tom, is what else do we have at the water? So you have your children. What are we doing with them in the room? We're caking them with really slippery
The lotions.
lotions
Yep.
of various types. So we've got water, suntan lotion, and hot sun, causing all that to go off their bodies on that slippery deck, making it more slippery, going to the bottom of their feet. Yeah, it's just a recipe for a potential problem.
It is, and I can't help but laugh. And I shouldn't laugh, but you know, because you and I know this happens all the time. But when we file a lawsuit, exactly like you're describing, right? The first thing that the cruise line will say is, "We never had notice that that was a dangerous condition or that's a dangerous area. Oh, we don't know." And it's like, really, we're gonna do that game? You know, you can't just put up a sign. You can't clean it up. You can't change the surface. You can't do all these other things that's just so commonsensical. He didn't know. I always love that one, you know. So it's unfortunately what we have to deal with.
And I was at Seed Trade. It's been quite a while now, but I met a company that made specialized decking that you can drop an egg from a pretty high height, you know, got over here, right? And you could drop it, and they did tests there, and it wouldn't break. And it was just fabulous stuff. I know I'll think of the name, but really, really great stuff. And they had it on a ship, but I don't think they've added it to all the ships. And I was kind of like, when it was so wonderful, it's kind of like, why isn't this on all the decking?
That, and you know, a lot of these ships, look, they go in dry dock a whole lot of times, right?
Yeah.
I don't know, however many years.
Like every 2 years.
And there's an opportunity for them to get it right, but you know, in large part, they just replace it with the same type of substandard material. Now, it may be more worn out, and they think they're doing the right thing by putting a newer material in it. But there's so many different composites and you know, slip-resistant type of materials. But for whatever reason, and I'm going to guess for aesthetics, they've made the decision not to do it, and God bless them, it's their decision. They can do whatever they want.
Yeah. So what unique legal issues do minor passengers face that you might be thinking about?
Well, the one I really want to talk about the most, well, there's two things. One is good and then one is bad. The good news is that generally speaking, as we've talked about, whenever you want to file a claim against a cruise line for one's injuries, you have a 1 year to get your lawsuit filed here, and usually 90% of the time it's the Southern District of Florida. But for a child, you get 3 years because that's the default rule in maritime. In maritime law, is the default rule in maritime law is 3 years, and you can't restrict a minor's right to bring a claim. So a minor has 3 years, and that's like the only positive news. The rest of it is unfortunately negative, and the most unfair context of that, and this is really where it should hit home, John, is remember what we talked about occasionally, DOSHA, which is the Death on the High Seas Act. So you know, and this is the saddest part about being a lawyer whenever you're dealing with a claim that involves a dead child. And look, I mean, as a parent, there's no greater fear that I have than of that. You understand, you know, bad things happen to adults or elderly people and things of that nature who've lived at least a good long life. You can somewhat, you know, get that around your head. But when it involves a child, it's all bets are off. But to make matters worse, the law says if your child, God forbid, were to perish on the cruise line, something bad, untoward happened, an excursion, whatever the facts may be, their life is essentially worthless. So you do not get your parental pain and suffering for the most horrific loss that one can imagine. You do not get to make a recovery for that, a financial claim for that. You're only entitled to make a claim for the economic losses, and that would usually be something limited like medical expenses up until the time where the child passed away, or funeral expenses. So it is very cheap for the cruise lines to deal with you when it involves the death of a child, as sad as that is to say. And, we've seen that. And, you do what you can to try and distinguish your case factually and procedurally, so, you don't come within dosha. But that has been on the books for over 100 years, and it's not changing anytime soon. So that is the greatest injustice that I can tell you in any venue, or in anything that I do, is to try and tell a parent that the value of their child's life is just a couple of dollars. Good luck with that one, right? It's awful.
That's got to be heartbreaking to have to be that messenger, and then I just can only imagine if you told me that, and I'm in your office and I'm thinking, okay, something obviously has happened, extreme situation. Maybe it's 3 months ago, 6 months ago, and now we're finally wanting to get some recourse, and you have to say something like that. You have to pass on this bitter pill that no parent's going to want to hear that.
Yeah, it's boy, those are the days where I wish I didn't get out of bed and come to the office. Those are ones, and thankfully it doesn't happen too often. Because it's happened. Children dying on cruise ships, it's happened, and I've been involved in those. But thankfully, it doesn't happen every day. But those are never situations I ever want to be in, again. That's the one that really you got to question your life choices in doing this as a profession when you have to have days like that.
Speaking of that, I wanted to congratulate you, by the way, that Tom and the Scolaro law firm is being recognized, because you were invited to speak. Actually, you're speaking this week at the Florida Justice Association, and the topic is going to be advanced litigation strategies for cruise ship personnel injury and assault claims. And Tom and his firm are truly, leading the way in this field of law. And I just wanted to congratulate you and everyone on the team. It's really a great honor. And you're going to pass on your knowledge to the other litigators to help represent people and try to right some of these wrongs when unfortunately they do happen.
Yeah, thank you, John. Yeah, it's we've been invited to speak in front of the FJA, and it's always a great honor and opportunity when I get to share, not just, I don't want to share war stories, but the how we did it, and how you get around things, because there's a lot of roadblocks in doing these types of cases. And these guys, to their credit, man, they have an army of great lawyers and law firms. These are not this is not your number 8 and 9 hitters in the lineup that they get. They get top shelf, to use a cruise line analogy, they get top shelf liquor, when you're dealing with them against you. And they get their thumpers, and it's always a challenge to deal with them. But, you just gotta, you gotta believe in yourself, understanding, what works, what doesn't, call upon your years of experience, and, stay focused on the mission. And the mission is always to help the clients and help them get a recovery. It was easy, everybody would do it, but, it's important work. And I feel very gratified and fulfilled by doing it.
I'm glad you're doing it. Like I said, we need people out there. Like I said, we're doing this not to scare anybody. We're doing this to have an outlet, a resource. So if something unfortunately does happen, because things happen, we all know that in this world. You have to know who to call, the best surgeon, the best litigator, so you can take care of things properly.
Exactly.
And on that note, what should a family do? Something happens. We've talked about all the what ifs. Now it happens. What should a family do if a child is injured during a cruise?
Well, first things first is get your child to the shipboard infirmary, the medical center. It's not quite an emergency room. It's more like a urgent care clinic. They can treat a lot of types of issues aboard a cruise ship, but they are not a substitute for an emergency room. They are not a substitute for a specialist, or even your pediatrician for that matter. These are people not from the U.S., most likely. They are foreign trained, and usually have some foreign training in a emergency type setting. Granted, the facilities are not as adequately equipped as what they were used to in their home country. So you're starting with not a facility that is perfectly outfitted to attend to your child's needs, and with a physician who is not specialized in either, orthopedic trauma surgery or pediatric issues, pediatric infectious disease, anything of that nature. So, but you got to get medical care, number one. Okay. Number two is make sure you report the incident to security. And number three, make sure you demand that all of the videotapes be preserved for, the hour or two before and the hour or two after any sort of event. And if you fill out an incident report, you say, I will not fill out an incident report unless I get a copy, or before you hand it in, you take a photograph, a screenshot of the incident report, because a lot of times they will not give it to you, even if they promise that they're going to give it to you. God forbid they lie, right? No, remember, it becomes adversarial once an injury occurs. So absolutely get shipboard medical care, get the report it, get the preserve the videotapes, get the incident report. But also I would tell you, don't just, again, this all depends on the severity of the situation. And I want to go, I want to talk to you about an occasion where, a couple of occasions where parents did the right thing. They brought their injured or sick, in this case, they were sick children, to the infirmary, and nothing was really done about it. So I had a case a number of years back where a very, very, very young child, I think she was 9 or 10 months old, just wasn't doing well, was throwing up. And they brought her down to the infirmary, and they said, look, my daughter doesn't throw up. She just doesn't throw up. This is not normal. And the doctor, of course, being on a cruise ship, says, well, motion sickness, gastritis, it's a stomach bug. Repeated this 5 or 6 times. They had to keep bringing her back to the room, back to the infirmary, back to the infirmary. Remember, this was a physician who did not have any specialization in children, did not have any specialization in infectious diseases. This was just somebody who, was qualified to work at a ER or an urgent clinic in their home country. And so they terribly misdiagnosed this child and lost all ability to get within a treatment window. And they missed a meningococcal meningitis infection. Wow. And the child was unfortunately medevaced to Florida too late, and ended up having some pretty severe amputations of parts of her limbs. And this was a child who was, like I said, 9 or 10 months at the time. So just because you're going to the infirmary, you got to remember that this is not your pediatrician. This is not the same level or skill that you would get at your hospital. This is not a pediatric hospital, right? Which is very different. Like if I'm, John, I don't know where you're at. I'm in Miami. And if something untoward happened to one of my children here, I'm not going to take them to the hospital, the emergency room. I'm going to Nicholas Children's Hospital, right, which is 15 minutes away. And it is a world-class medical center and emergency room with every single specialist involving children you can imagine. Okay, that's where I'm going. And many people, wherever they're from, whether they're from Boston or New York or Pennsylvania, they generally have access to a children's hospital, within an hour or two drive. And they would send their children there if they could not get treated in an emergency room. That's not available on a cruise ship. And you get into you got to deal with confirmation bias with doctors, where they think they know it all and they don't. And so you're going to always, I forget where I heard this. There was a stat, and I'm going to butcher it, so I won't even say it, but intuition and your gut, parents have it off the charts, right? You must absolutely, if anybody listens to anything I say, is it doesn't matter if they think you're the crazy person, okay? Listen to your parental instincts. This has been physiologically developed in us humans for millions of years for a reason. Listen to it, okay? Don't let people tell you you're wrong, you're crazy, or we get treated here. No, man, you got to listen to that intuition. Millions of years of biology is not wrong.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Your gut knows, right?
Yeah. And, that was certainly one involving a child. And the other situation I had involving a child was there was a 16-year-old girl who started to display the signs and symptoms of a stroke. And so she goes to the cruise ship medical center. Her mom's a nurse, right? So mom certainly knows, and says, "Look, I think my daughter's having a stroke. This is, look at her. She's got aphasia. She's got the weakness of the arm, textbook signs." And the cruise ship doctor, who was not from the States, didn't understand. She was on some birth control at the time to regulate heavy periods. She wasn't on birth control for sexual use. She was on birth control to regulate her heavy periods. And this particular birth control pill was very effective at sort of regulating the size of her menstrual cycle and her periods. But it came with a very small risk of a stroke. Now the medication is now off the market, but back then it was on the market. And so the mom, who's a nurse, is like, I think, my child's having a stroke. No, children don't have a stroke, can't have a stroke, but she's on this medication. No. You have 3.5 hours of a window to effectively treat a stroke with a clot busting medication called TPA. And they can't give it to you on the cruise line. Even if they think you're having a stroke, they cannot give it to you. It's there, it's in the infirmary, right? But they still can't give it to you because you have to have a CAT scan first. And of course, there's no CAT scans on cruise ships, because the reason you don't give that type of medication without a CAT scan is, remember, there's two types of strokes. There's the blockage where something can't get through, and there's the active bleed where there's just a hemorrhage. Yeah. So if you give the clot busting type of medication to somebody who has the hemorrhage type of stroke, all that's going to do is make them it's an anticoagulant. They're not going to be able to clot, and they'll bleed to death. So it makes sense that you have to have a CAT scan first, right, to rule out, categorize the stroke. But cruise ships don't have these CAT scans. And the crazy thing is they make portable CAT scans now, right? I mean, it's available, but they don't have them. Now, they will make a humongous investment in the world's next greatest water slide, right? But will they make an investment in, modern medicine that would actually save lives while somebody is out in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico or the Atlantic Ocean? I don't know, call me crazy, but if I'm allocating where my money is going on a cruise line, it's not that much of a ticket item. And remember, they get to charge for all these things. So they can charge whatever the hell they want for an onboard portable CT scan. They could turn it into a profit center. But for whatever reason, they again have chosen not to do so. And it's sort of like your experience earlier, John, where you were talking about how something bad happened on one of the cruise ships with lifeguards, and now more of them are instituting it. So my hope is that eventually that will happen when we deal with these medical centers, and that they will plug in place the available medical technology that is accessible to everybody.
I know you brought this up before with the portable CT scans, but the fact that you just said, I heard you say they have the medication, but they really can't give the patient the medication because it needs to have a CAT scan. So that just doesn't make sense. It's just not adding up in my brain. Like, why?
Well, the reason why is because there's also a cardiac use for it. There's a cardiac type of use for that medication that you can use without having to have a CAT scan. But the heart and the brain are two completely different things. So you are allowed to do it with regard to certain cardiac issues without a CAT scan. But when it comes to either a bleed in the brain or a blockage in the brain, it's right there. It's on the shelf.
Yeah. And then the next thing that hits me is how common, we know strokes are very common in society. It's very common, just like heart issues. It's one of the two leading things that affect human beings. And guess what? Older human beings that happen to be cruising in the sun, consuming alcohol, exerting themselves. It's just, and they're not, 3 hours is not very long.
No.
And, it's so it's sad, and I'm not a professional on this, but most people aren't going to be able to be within that 3 hour window.
No, it's very, listen, I can, you kind of asked two questions there. So let me ask them.
Sorry.
How common is it? Incredibly common. I mean, I'm looking at my board right now and I have, I think 7 active stroke cases, cruise ship stroke cases right now. And that's just me. I'm just little old Tom, right? I'm just one guy. So I have that, and I've had many others in the past. And so that 3.5 hour window, it is so tight, right? Because you have to go down to the infirmary. They have to deal with all the intake, the triage you. Then the doctor has to come see you. Then they have to do a differential diagnosis. And they usually, even though it should be patently obvious, they usually do not make the diagnosis as quickly as one would think. In every one of my cruise ship cases I deal with, I take issue with when they call the stroke, right? It's usually 1, 2, 3 hours after somebody presents. I'm like, dude, look at these symptoms right here, okay? Let's go through the Cincinnati stroke scale, and start awarding points. It's a stroke. A stroke is a stroke. You know it when you know it's right there. There's never a reason to. So I always take issue with how long it takes them to diagnose a stroke. And then that's only one part of the equation. Then you have to figure out, okay, just because they can, they can accurately call it a stroke, what good does it do if you're out, 30 miles, 50 miles, 150 miles? You have to prove that there's a way to get that individual to a shoreside hospital so that they can get you on a table for the CT scan and needle ready within that 3.5 hours. And it's a tough assignment, but we can do it with, I use a stable of experts, both in emergency medicine and also logistics, Coast Guard, people who are trained in Coast Guard policies and procedures and things of that nature, who can say, look, this is when it should have been called. This is how long it would take to rally the assets. This is how long it is of a flight out there. This is the hoist time. This is how long it'll take to get back to the, roof and then to the hospital. And we can get it there. But it's a bit of a challenge, as they say.
That's sad. It's just because I know they're, like you said, they're not doing it. And so if they have the CT, they just could roll it out, even if it was in some off-site area. And they said, okay, let's do it. It takes a little time. An emergency situation like a stat, kind of let's roll it out, put it in a public area, get the scan, put it back. It could be in a common area, like even off of a like a conference room.
Yeah, it's John. All things are doable. Look, if they could fit 18 water slides on these things, I saw one the other ice skating rinks. I don't know what else there is. What isn't there? What isn't on a cruise ship, right? They have everything.
And you mentioned Disney World, like theme parks, right? Yeah. And I specifically remember in the early days that an executive had said, we are competing with Vegas when Vegas was really booming, and it still is. Is it ever not, right? But they says we're directly competing with Vegas, and look what they have now. These the modern ships, and Yeah, one side note, I am noticing because of all the groups on Facebook and people posting about cruising so much. I mean, it's really becoming mainstream more and more every day. People want to know, why is such and such ship turning around? And so I am noticing, and this is the good news, ships are diverting more and more and more because they have 6,000 passengers on them. They're diverting and dropping off sick patients.
I mean, think about it. Look at the numbers, right? You just I'm sure if I paid attention to statistics in college, I'd know the answer to this. But when you add thousands of passengers plus thousands of crew times the amount of square footage times the amount of entertainment and other devices and services and obstacles and things of the nature, divided into it, there's an equation there where this is probably on some sort of metric predictable. And I'm glad that if you've noticed that, John, that's a good thing, because maybe they're getting tired of dealing with people like me and my contemporaries who say, listen, why didn't you just divert the vessel?
Yeah, it's very common.
Yeah. And I just wish it was more common, because then I'd stop getting these phone calls. But I'm dealing with, like I said, 7 current cases right now where there needed to be a medevac off the ship or something of that nature, and they just, for whatever reason, didn't do it, delayed it, misdiagnosed it. Pick your miss, and it just happens.
Okay, and for everybody watching, of course, if you have a question, please ask it below. Please ask it in the comments if you watch this later on, and please reach out to Tom if you have a question. We even talked about this. People can actually call you from the ship if something were to happen. You brought that up. You can call Tom at 305-424-2300 and email him at tom@usentry.law. He doesn't do commerce. He does law.
That's right. You got it.
You can visit him. He also, cruiseinjury.law is also his other unique URL. Reach out to him. Get your questions answered. We hope nothing happens. But so we've covered so many different things. I know we've had some great discussions. What have we missed so far in this discussion?
Well, one thing maybe the last topic to talk about is this issue that's becoming a little bit more prevalent, a little bit on the cruise ship. I've seen a little bit of it, but I would expect it to be more in the future, and more so is like this video voyeurism, where you have these rogue people setting up cameras, webcams, in people's rooms, and exploiting them, things that they should, recording them. That's a new and interesting topic that is coming about. And I would just tell people to be mindful of that. There are devices that people can travel with that can tell them when there's some sort of electromagnetic field that is recording them. So I don't know if I'd go as far as recommend traveling that way, but my wife would. That's just how she rolls. So I would say pay attention to things of that nature, and be mindful who's photographing your children. I'm a stickler for that one. I don't want anybody, strangers, crew, anybody taking photographs of my children and doing something with it. It could be all innocent, right? But all it takes is that photo to go the wrong place, the wrong time, in the wrong hands, and then it gets diverted and perverted. So don't let people take pictures of your kids when you're on cruise ships. You don't know these people. You don't know the countries that they're from. You don't know what laws they operate by or under. And that goes for strangers, other passengers there. Just don't. It's a bad practice.
Yeah, just don't invite it, huh? You're in a public place. There's only so much you can do, but just don't think that there's not people with alternative motives, right?
Because there are, and I wish I could tell you there weren't, but I've seen too much sickness in life and too many bad people and too many bad intentions. So I would love to live in utopia. I hear it's a great place, but unfortunately I don't. So we have to mind ourselves.
And we had a comment, and I'm just going to bring it up. Keith actually mentioned on YouTube. He said kids don't belong on cruise ships.
Yeah. Well, you know what, Keith? There's some people who actually agree with you. I think, was it MSC is now converting to adults only, or one of those lines is.
I don't think MSC, but I know
was one of them that I just heard about recently. This is like a month ago. That's one of them is converting to just adults only, because there's a great audience for that. Is a lot of people don't want to bring kids on cruise ships, and a lot of people don't want to be around other people's kids on cruise ships.
I know Virgin Voyages. Virgin Voyages is definitely adults only. They're real big on that, and they're very more of inclusive, where you pay a price and things are included, and even the theming and the entertainment is a little more adult focused. I know. Let's see. I know Viking actually had. In the past, I think you could be 16, then they changed to 18, very adult focused. But you're right. There's also, I think Carnival might even have some adult ones that might have came out. I have to double check, but they like a Journeys or something like that. It might be.
Yeah. Now there's certainly, there are offerings from some of the cruise lines where there's that option to go on adults only, but for the most part, like, Carnival, Disney, Royal, NCL, kids aren't going anywhere. That's their bread and butter. So.
And Travel Cake Trips actually had a great comment, and they say preparation is key. And then they went on. They said they're going to go back to work, Tom, but they're going to come back and watch this just like many other people do after this is recorded. And they say great information.
Well, and, glad we could help.
And they made a comment too. Someone else wrote, it's not only people who love children that gravitate towards those types of jobs. I'm assuming they're talking about, being around the children, maybe in the kids clubs areas and by the pools. And you never know, do you?
You don't. And John, I don't want to scare anybody. Like I said, I deal with some of the worst of humanity and what some of the worst people in the world could do. And you almost just have to tell yourselves, and it's just acknowledge it.
I kind of lost you for a second. Can you go back? For some reason, I lost you a little bit.
Yeah, I was saying that's okay. I said I don't want to scare people too much, but I've seen the worst in humanity and the worst what people can do, and it always involves children. That's the worst thing that anybody can do is do something bad to children. I don't care anything else. I think that people who harm children, who exploit children, should be hung up by their testicles and out there for everybody to take shots at. But there are people out there like that. So you must acknowledge what is the worst thing that can happen, have it in your mind, and act accordingly. Not, again, because you don't want to have a situation where, had I just done this, or had I just done this, or had I thought about this, because that sort of guilt I've seen it in my practice where these parents that I represent sometimes on some of these sexual exploitation cases, like, well, what did I miss? What didn't I do? What could I have seen? It's like, it's torture. You're torturing yourself for the rest of your life. And it's so unfortunate. So good comments, good questions. And it goes back to what you and I probably talked about the very first time is no one's out there to watch your back. No one's out there to protect you or your family or children. You have to do it. You have to be the first one to do it.
Yeah. So, and while you're talking, I have to just say this, it seems like society as a whole, and even the courts, protect some of these really bad people in our world. Where I worked in public safety for a long time, and what shocked me being around the court system is the court wouldn't even share some of the details of the actual crime with the jury. And of course, it didn't get out to the public. So it might have been known potentially that something really heinous had happened, but it was hidden from the jury and hidden from the society. That how extreme, how just vile and disgusting and just crazy bad this type of crime happened, was, and then do that on a massive scale. So it's almost like there's a part of society that protects and hides some of these really, because here's the thing, because they didn't want to inflame the jury or whatever the legal term is. They didn't want to upset the jury pool. Are you kidding me? But that's out there though, right?
I'm glad you see it, and I'm glad you said it, because there are, and this goes for a lot of things, there are so many absurdities that we have to deal with where courts will rule, well, that's not relevant to the issue, or it's overtly prejudicial. things of that nature, words like buzzwords like that we have to deal with. I'm like, can we all just be honest? And
Yeah.
look, this is what it is. Stop protecting people. Stop, kowtowing to feelings and things of that nature. It's just, I don't know. I can go on a soapbox with this book forever. Because like I said, I can separate the legal Tom from the parental Tom. Parental Tom is, I'm hanging somebody by the tree,
Yeah, it's rough.
Legal Tom is different. I don't enjoy it.
When you know how bad things are, and like I said, I think society is really sheltered. When you're close to things like you were and some of the things I were, you're like, people don't know, and there's no transcripts out there publicly accessible. It seems unless the media pays to have it done, you really can't read all the details, which is shocking to me. Like AI could probably do that in a split second nowadays. And I think there needs to be I guess I'm getting on my soapbox, Tom.
It's okay. I think
there needs to be in 2026, every transcript of every trial needs to be made and converted and put out there in the public.
Last point I will make on this is just to shine a light on exactly what you're saying. Look how long it took to get the Jeffrey Epstein stuff to light, right? Yeah. I mean, come on. And we're talking about children and protecting children.
And they're still saying there's 3.5 million records that are still.
I don't know if we'll ever see the true story, right?
Yeah,
they should all be hung up by their balls.
Yeah, it's shady. Well, I think the Italian came out in both of us today.
I probably should keep that back a little bit. Yeah.
Well, so what final thoughts do we have? And like I said, I know you got to get ready for your speech this week or your talk. Yeah. Congratulations again on that. What if something happens, on board? Should a client reach out to you and make sure that they don't waste time on this? I know they have a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I same thing I tell everybody is look, you don't want to sit on your rights, and you don't want to be the one to determine or decide, well, there's probably not a case, or there's probably nothing we can do, or I don't want to do any. You don't be that person that make that decision. You don't know. I mean, I would say consult with a legal professional, somebody who is an expert in this area, who knows what they're doing, and let them make that decision if this is something that they can help you with or not. And they'll explain the reasons why they can or why they cannot. But don't be the one without the legal training or the experience of saying, is this something that we can do or something not? Because how many claims die when people think, well, probably nothing. It's probably not a case. And lo and behold, you sat on your rights and you sat on them for too long, and there's nothing anybody could do at that point.
Yeah, I guess they do it too long, or they didn't know who to contact, or a combination of both. They said, "Oh, they don't want to be bothered. They don't want to put something on somebody potentially on the stand, especially the child." They just put things off, right?
Yeah. Consult with a lawyer. This is what we get paid to do. We give free consultations to people all day long. We talk through their issues that they're going on with their life or whatever the problem is. A lot of times we can help. Sometimes we can't. But we will certainly always give everybody our informed decision so that they can feel good about the steps and the decisions that they're making, whether for themselves or especially if it's for their children.
Well, Tom, thanks for taking so much time today covering this really sensitive topic. And of course, I'm glad we had these great discussions amongst ourselves here with everybody else. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it.
Okay, have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye, Ronan.